Good morning. It's good to be with you. Today we're talking about, we're starting out at least with signs. And you've seen them everywhere. Signs serve many purposes. Sometimes they are simply for conveying information. Let's see if this works. Like this one. This seems to be fairly important information that you may want to heed. Or they might be more like this one, which seems very appropriate for today. But sometimes they offer directions. Like this. This must be Maine, I would guess. For signs that give directions, the sign itself is, not really the point. It doesn't matter that much. What matters is, what it is pointing you to. Its purpose is to help you get to wherever that is taking you. Signs can also be beautiful. They could be beautiful. They could be weird colors. But all that matters is if it is effective, if it points to something else. In fact, it may be better if it doesn't attract too much attention to itself, because that might distract from its purpose. Sometimes, though, the sign itself is a wonder to behold, like this one. And I think Arlen's probably seen this, I imagine, because I think you're from Millinocket, aren't you? Yeah. See, yeah.
That's Loch Rock.
That's what?
Loch Rock. It's right on the way up to Mountain Town.
Yes, it is. And this, it is not just a sign. It is a destination in and of itself. Many of the cars that pass by that way stop and take pictures and pose in front of it. I don't know if people can get cell service there. Maybe they can these days, but if they can, I'm sure it's probably a social media star. Everybody probably posts their pictures they take at this place. Oh, and on a side, I should say that picture off to the side is from some place called Chip's Folio, and I hope that whoever Chip is forgives me for using his photo. But with a sign as beautiful as this one, the question is whether or not you can see the beautiful mountains behind it, whether or not it is pointing beyond, or if it is an object of artwork itself to be appreciated. It says keep Maine beautiful, but just ironically, to see it, you have to look at a rock rather than the beautiful mountains behind it. Also, if we painted more rocks like this, we would have a lot of beautiful artwork, but less natural beauty. But I love the rock. I love going by it. It is unquestionably a pleasing work of art. But like all good art, its purpose is ambivalent or multivalent. Is the experience of the artwork itself the objective, or does it invite you into an experience of something beyond itself? With that question on our minds, we turn to the book of John. In the list of readings for the year, the lectionary of the gospel readings will be from John up through Pentecost. And you may have already noticed that in the book of John is all about signs. We come across many signs that point to the divinity of Jesus, and this is different from the other Gospels. In the other books, Jesus generally does not proclaim himself to be God. He certainly points that way. He illustrates his unity with God, and he lets people figure that out for themselves. His preferred title in the other books is the Son of Man, which could mean simply human being, or it could have a more elevated meaning of somebody who plays a pivotal role in history. But what we find in the book of John is not so much the Son of Man as the Son of God. There are many miracles. I don't know what was last week, but you might have heard of one last week. These miracles function as signs pointing to the divinity of Jesus. And in case the signs are not enough, Jesus also says outright on many occasions, I am one with God. And the passage that we had for this morning is one of these examples. It ends with Jesus saying plainly, the Father and I are one. Before going further into the meanings of the book of John, it is important to make a distinction here. If signs are effective, if they move you to the reality beyond which they point, they may be called symbols. And this distinction comes from the work of Paul Tillich, a well-known theologian, who explains that unlike signs, symbols have the quality of participating in the reality to which they point. In other words, a sign says, look, God is this way, while a symbol would say, look, God is here. If the signs in John invite us into a new reality that has been shown to us by Jesus, they function as symbols if they bring us to that reality. So people who think symbolically often love the book of John. Those who enjoy reading Carl Jung and pondering archetypes that emerge in the human psyche often love to delve into the symbols of this book. Many mystics who cultivate an inner path to God love it because, of the multivalency of the symbols. The stories, the ordinary objects that Jesus uses can reveal many different meanings. And turning them over in prayer can reveal new angles in which ordinary people and events are seen in an entirely new way. Symbols are like light that casts off many hues. Light moves and dances throughout the day. The tree in your yard looks different in the deep shadows of the morning and in the glare of noonday and in the golden hour of the evening. Light also changes as it is refracted through water, intensifying colors and splitting spectacularly into wavelengths that you can see as it shines through rainy windows or blazes as rainbows in the sky. Symbols hold revelatory power as long as these multiple meanings are not collapsed. If the possible meanings are many, you may always find something new. Though the book of John is a favorite of mystics and miners of symbolic meanings, I will admit that I am not such a fan of this book. I don't know if I can say that in church, but I just did. It was, the last gospel written, and it responds to concerns that are arising as, the Jesus movement is transitioning into a church. Christians and Jews have now separated. They are no longer together worshiping in the temple. And we hear the animosity of the split frequently in this book. And for instance, I changed a word in the reading this morning. The word temple goers is actually Jews in the New Revised Standard Version. And I changed it because it doesn't make sense to call one group in this story the Jews, because everybody in this story is a Jew. It only makes sense in light of a split that happened many decades later. Likewise, the focus on the divinity of Jesus in this book reflects, the needs of an emerging church that happened many decades later. To form an institution, a durable institution, the church needs to claim authority for its leaders. It needs to make them clergy. And emphasizing the divinity of Jesus, gives them more of a claim to divine authority. But more importantly, in my view, the Jesus we encounter in John comes too close to being a sign than the inbreaking of a new reality. Jesus borders on saying, look at me, rather than come with me and you will encounter God. I was reading a book about a medieval German mystic named Meister Eckhart. The insight that Meister Eckhart holds for our contemplation of signs, of the signs that we encounter this morning in the reading from John, is a difficult one. Eckhart calls us to abandon everything we think we know about God. In other words, to look beyond the signs and to get them out of your mind so you can see what is beyond. This way of approaching God by letting go of all that God is not is called the via negativa, the negative way. In a book about Eckhart, the one that I spent most of last weekend reading, called Dangerous Mystic, the author Joel Harrington explains the path this way. Only when the seeker had made his or her mind free of all images, literally unpictured, could he or she learn, firstly, how to pray to God. For God is above names and ineffable. Eckhart puts it this way: whatever is familiar to you is your foe. The way to God, according to him, is to stop pursuing God with our intellect and desires. Because in his words, as long as you want more and more, God cannot work in you. Through this self-emptying that he calls us to, of all that is not God, we prepare fertile ground for what he called the divine spark, a capacity for God that is deep within each of us, to bring about, again, what he called the birth of God in our souls. And you may have heard of this concept of the divine spark. Quakers call it the inner light. And it is the idea that there is something of God, a unique part of God's being, God's self, within each one of us. And if we can remove the clutter that obscures this light within, God can shine in us. Describing the experience of revealing and discovering this divine spark within, Eckhart said, "Nothing is so close to me as God. God is closer to me than I am to myself." So I hope this has made some sense. The path beyond the signs is not an easy one. It is tempting to look at the sign and to tell ourselves that we have in fact experienced the reality that is beyond the sign. It is easier to stay focused on Jesus than it is to participate in the new reality that is present to us even after Jesus ascends, which we will observe at the end of the month. Most of us will not be able to follow the advice that Eckhart gave to his new novices in his Dominican house, because that advice was to engage in absolute stillness for as long as you possibly can. However, we can begin to notice when we are simply posing in front of the signs rather than following them to what is beyond. If we have any hope of understanding what Jesus means when he says that he is one with God, it begins with remembering that God is beyond all that we can hold in our minds. If we can let go of our need for signs, in the pure unknowing, we may find that God, in Eckhart's words, speaks to the soul with one from one in one, and in one still one, everlastingly Amen.
You've been listening to a sermon by our guest, Reverend Raymond Clothier, Associate Pastor of Bates College in Lewiston, Maine. Filling in this week for Reverend Stephen Carnahan, pastor of High Street Congregational Church in Auburn, Maine. If you feel inspired by what you hear, we invite you to join us in person for worship services every Sunday morning beginning at 10 o'clock. Of course, you can always listen to our church sermons on the web. New sermons are posted every Monday by midday. Please take a moment to explore this website for more information about our church, or visit our Facebook page at High Street Congregational Church, UCC, where you'll find the video version of our sermons as well. We hope that God's presence will be known to you every hour of every day. May God's blessings rest upon you, now and always. See you next week.